Welcome, everyone. We are so excited to have you here for today's webinar, How to Save Time and Grow Your AR with AI Tools. I'm Hilda, Content Manager here at the DEO, and I'm thrilled to be joined by our speaker today, Steijn, CEO and co-founder of Lassie, and Dr. Kwon, who is a DEO member who owns a 2-location practice in Menlo Park, California. And today we're diving into how AI can transform your revenue cycle management by eliminating tedious manual tasks like EOB posting, managing denials, billing, and you'll also be hearing a true success story. So grab your coffee and your notebook and get ready to learn. So I'll turn it over to Steijn to start your presentation.
Thank you, Hilda, for the kind introduction. And hello, everyone. I hope you're enjoying your coffee or your tea wherever you are in the country. And I'm looking forward to spending time together to indeed discuss like the AR in your practice and the lessons we can learn from growing that with AI tools and automation. So what we're going to explore together are how the best offices handle their revenue cycle management process. We're fortunate that we have a very successful and thriving DEO member with us today that I will introduce in a minute, Dr. Kwon. We're going to talk about the EOB posting, managing the denials, how they build their patients. Then we're also going to look at what AI and software tools are available to like automate 95% of that process while improving the accuracy and the speed of your revenue cycle management. And then coming from Silicon Valley, people ask me often, where are we headed in 5 years from now? What is it like to like run my practice or my practices? So we will also like look ahead and see what's to come, being in the heart of Silicon Valley. But before we jump into that, let me briefly introduce myself. So like Hilda said, my name is Steijn, pronounced like Einstein. For those of you who wonder how to say that, and I come from the world of software and growing technology companies. And in a prior life, before I went into dentistry, and I will tell you a little bit more how I ended up there, I led growth for two of the fastest growing apps over the past year. So you might have heard of Robinhood, the stockbroker app. It was a tiny company when I was there, and now has more than 20 million users. It's crazy to think about that. And another company, Coinbase, that I worked for, that was also very small and now has more than 100 million users like across the world. Now, I got exposed to dentistry and what it takes to run a practice myself, mainly after talking to my own dentist, who's on the call with us today, Dr. Kwon. After I helped him and thousand, I think plus at this point in time, other doctors implementing AI and automation, I thought it would be useful to share some lessons like we learned along the way together with you all about revenue cycle management and what's to come with artificial intelligence. But before we jump into that, I thought it would be interesting to invite my dentist, who started all of this, because I worked in your practice 9 to 5, Eric, so you're also technically my boss for a while. Why don't you introduce yourself first before we dive into your practice?
Yes, thank you, Stein. Hello, my name is Eric Kwon. I'm a DEO member myself, and I have a general and pediatric practice in Menlo Park, California. Over the past 4 years, we grew the practices from 3.5 million in annual collections and almost $1 million in outstanding AR to last year when we were able to finish at almost 11 million in collections. I'm looking forward to sharing what I learned in streamlining and automating as many processes along the way.
Nice. Yes, you are truly a success story. And it makes me so happy that where you are compared to when we met each other as a patient initially, right? So that's fun. All right, let's dive in together. So first, let's look together at like what is a best in class like revenue cycle management process looks like, and why does it actually like matter? And then, like I mentioned, after seeing this transition across like 1,000+ docs and many DEO members, like I will share where I think the future like is going in about like 5 years from now. Why don't we start with like the AR process and how it used to be in your practice, Dr. Kwon?
Yeah, back in 2020, I ran into some of the staffing issues that may be all too familiar to many of you. Facing the departure of my office manager, I fell almost $1 million behind on outstanding insurance accounts receivable. So no insurance payments were being processed, no payments reconciled, no appeals made, no patients were billed, and my stress was slowly building about running out of cash. Initially, I tried a outside billing agency for a couple months, but I realized soon that I needed something more reliable. So I had to step in myself to do the AR process to make matters both better and worse. My practice was rapidly growing, averaging over 100 new patients each month. After seeing a patient, I would submit the claim to insurance and wait for the paper check to arrive by mail in 3 to 4 weeks. When the envelope would finally arrive, I was elated to feel the fruits of my labor, but my response soon became bipolar as I was confronted with the sad, harsh reality of posting a huge stack of paper EOBs, thousands of procedure codes, and hundreds of patient charts. In addition to my normal duties, treating patients, I was soon spending lunch breaks and late nights posting 200 EOBs a week, making 1,500 adjustments, matching the EOBs with my ledgers, filing 50 secondaries, making countless appeals, on the phone with the happiest insurance reps, and then finally I could send hundreds of paper statements to my patients. To further complicate things, we all know that insurance companies don't work like us or for us. When insurance companies would deny the claim, I would then have to resubmit with additional info and wait another 3 to 4 weeks. Then I would cross my fingers that insurance would pay. If not, I would just write it off. I quickly came to the painful realization that even in the heart of Silicon Valley, dental payments were quite antiquated, and our practice was drowning in a sea of paper. It was disheartening. Instead of spending quality time with my patients, my team and I were spending hours every week on manual data entry. Some of you, and perhaps some of your teammates, might know the same feeling.
Thanks for sharing that story. And I know that, to quote a famous poet, Tay Swift, all too well, because I was there when you were a million in the hole. And I bet a story familiar with like many of the DEO members. And I could only imagine would it have been for you, Dr. Kwon, now like you're tripled your revenue. Imagine how many papers that had to be like punched in. So now that we established like that revenue cycle management process from what we're going to talk about, right? Like submitting a claim to then receiving the EOBs and the payments like from the insurance company and then having to punch them into the practice management system, needing to check against the bank account if these payments actually match up, doing the reconciliation, doing the follow-ups, the patient like bills. The first thing that I would do is audit in your practice, if you haven't done that yet. Who's currently doing that process for you? So do you have someone like Dr. Kwon initially like in-house, or in his case even himself, entering these like insurance payments every week? Do you work with an outsourced like agency? Who's the one, or who are the people that are doing the follow-ups and the patient statements? And then the last thing I would check is like, how do you get paid by insurance companies? So how do you mainly get paid on EFTs already, direct deposits that go into your bank account? Are you paying fees on these EFTs, which we will talk about like a little bit? Do you get paid on paper checks, on virtual credit cards? Like you want to start there, because as a mentor of mine would say, like you can't improve what you can't measure. Yeah, this matters a lot because it is the lifeblood or the beating heart of like your practice. If you don't process the insurance payments and you don't, as a result of that, bill the patients, like you can't make payroll and you're gonna run like out of business. So a very tight revenue cycle management process is vital to like a sustainable business. Not a surprise that if you come to the conclusion after this audit that you're doing it mainly manually and partly on paper, or you pay fees, then you're not alone. Like about 80% of the practices across the country still do this manually and get paid for the most part on paper or through virtual credit cards. So now we've worked with so many practices, and we're gonna talk about automation in a minute, but like I thought it would be helpful to share some best practices on like what I've seen as a kind of the gold standard for revenue cycle management, or like how do the best practices do this like with people and like with teams. And I know that you all are not exactly the average dentists or owners. I wouldn't be surprised if many of you already have implemented like some of these like best practices. But let's run through a quick like checklist to make sure that like you can do a proper audit when you go back to the office. So the first thing you want to do is like make sure that like all your insurance companies pay you out on free EFTs, meaning that the money from insurance company directly goes into the bank account of that location, or of like if you have one location of your own bank account. There is no reason anymore to be on paper checks to receive virtual credit cards. And there's also no reason to pay fees on your EFTs. Like almost all insurance companies have a path and an enrollment path where you can set up free EFTs. It's something that we helped you with, Eric, right? That we will talk about like in a second. But like regardless, like make sure that you figure out because that can easily like be like thousands of dollars that you are paying on EFT fees. The second one is check if you still receive virtual credit cards. Virtual credit cards are these pieces of paper that come in the office that have an actual credit card number on it, and they're sent by the insurance company. And if you want to cash these virtual credit cards, you need to run them to a merchant terminal. And that means that you're paying a merchant fee, which for most members like was like thousands of dollars a month that like we were able to eliminate. Regardless of setting up software, you want to make sure that those virtual credit cards are gone. Now, I know that some of you like cancel the virtual credit cards and then request paper checks, but unfortunately they keep on coming back. And what you want to make sure of is that they like are not coming in at all anymore, so you don't waste time constantly canceling like virtual credit cards. The last part on the money like side is like set up a separate bank account. That is what I've seen most successful practices do for insurance deposits. Because a common question I got asked a lot, but that's great. Like, I want my money in my bank account and I don't want to receive paper payments anymore. But how is my team going to check if that payment actually like came in? Because in the good old days of the paper check and the virtual credit card, you had it in your hand. Remember Dr. Kwon in your practice, and on the other hand, we had the paper EOB. So when I punched them in for you, I could hand you the check, and you could very easily like validate or verify that like both actually were received. And what I've seen the best practices do is they just because they when they move to EFTs, then like need to give a staff member access to that bank account, right? Because the team still needs to see if that money was received, and not all practices feel comfortable with that because there might be payroll in there and other expenses. So what practices like do as a best-in-class example would be setting up a separate bank account solely dedicated like for your insurance deposits, such that you can give an insurance coordinator or an office manager or a revenue cycle manager access to that specific bank account, and they can then only see the EFTs that came in from the insurance companies. So in that way, your team can do their job, punch in all these payments by hand, and then cross-reference or check and reconcile all these payments against the bank account. So that is on the payment side, and then on the posting side, there is no need to receive these like stacks and stacks of EOBs in the mail anymore either. A law change, the Affordable Care Act, that most insurance companies like they need to comply with the law that states that they need to offer EFTs and ERAs. So like most insurance portals, almost all of them at this point in time, they have websites and portals where you can go, or clearinghouses where you can go, where you can actually get the 200 EOBs like corresponding with the $25,000 Delta check that you received. So make sure that you sign up for all these portals, and the reconciliation that best practices do without software is basically on the left screen here. You can see this was me actually posting for Dr. Kwon. Like I have this very big like PDF full of Delta like EOBs. I think there were about like 200 EOBs and patients like on this. And then I punched them in one by one into my practice management system on the right side of like my screen. So I went to the Delta website, downloaded the PDF, and then started spending 6 hours taking all these EOBs and all these procedures and all these adjustments and all these notes like manually over to in your case like Dentrix. That is, if you want to do it with people, like the best in class kind of like setup. Then in terms of cadence, I've seen two things. Like one, this is a daily habit, right? Of punching in like payments in the best practices, and they also appeal every week. So like the moment there is a crown denied, the moment there is something wrong with the claim, like they file and refile claims like every week, but the best practices do that like every day. They make it part of the operating cadence that like after a payment is punched in, they like right away resubmit a claim. The same goes for patient billing. So like most common is that practices do this every month. And like the best practices do this every week or bill patients the remaining amount like right after they like process the EOBs and process the denial. Now, it is obviously really, really hard for an $11 million practice, but also for a $3 million practice to keep on punching in like hundreds of like EOBs, sending out tens of like secondary filings or refiles, and then build all these patient statements, right? So the reality is that most of the practices doing this completely with people, maybe sometimes like are caught up because they have a good quarter or month. But when people do this, you go to these ups and down cycles where you're caught up and then you're like hundreds of thousands of dollars behind. You might not be happy with like the accuracy like of this. So it is really, really hard if people need to do all of this to like have all your EOBs posted, no check gone missing, all appeals were made like every week or every day, and all patients are fully billed. Like I still need to come across a practice that has that fully like up and running in real time because it's not really human to kind of like do that. All right, so that is what best in class like RCM looks like when you do it like with a team. Now let's have a look at Dr. Kwon's practice as an example. So what we did in his practice, right, Dr. Kwon, I think we've automated 95% of this like insurance AR cycle, right? At this point in time. So there's very little work left. For him and his team there. The insurance companies, they put the money directly into his bank accounts, like through EFTs. There are no fees paid on that. So all these insurance companies, Delta, Cigna, MetLife as an example, they're now like within 3, I think, or 4 days after, maybe 7 sometimes, but like definitely within like a week, 7 business days, payouts into your bank account. And then we've trained software to take all that the EOBs and the information like from the insurance companies, and then instead of his staff like having to manually transfer over all these EOBs, they're posted into his practice management system in real time. And then in his practice, it also checks if all these payments that were entered into the ledgers in the practice management system match to the T like what is in the bank account. So it runs a real time reconciliation process and it creates tasks, which is like what we will get next, whenever there's something that needs the attention of the team. So in that way, his team changed from making sure that like all the payments are in and chasing down payments to actually like having software do all of that, and then his team focused on the growth of the practice or finally filing all the refiles. And we will talk a little bit more about what you did with your time there, but that's how far technology and AI already is. So what tools did we implement to get to that point where like 95% of this process is done by software? 3 steps. So the first step in that transition process to like automated accounts receivables is enrolling the offices, what we just talked about in EFTs. So I think you, Dr. Kwon, were mainly on paper checks by the time we started, right? Maybe one of your major insurance companies was already on EFTs, but for the most part, I think you get paid on paper, right? So the first thing we did was like figuring out how for all the insurance companies we can set up like free EFTs, and then setting up digital EOBs. Because if you want to train software, you need to make sure that everything is digitized, that the money goes straight into the bank accounts, and that the EOBs come in electronically, such that the computer can pick them up and can be trained to like post these payments into a practice management system. So for those of you who've done that before, the EFT enrollment, you might say, or might know from that experience that all these enrollments, it's pretty tricky to do and almost undoable for like an average office because it's fragmented, how you need to set up EFTs. The options that are advertised are sometimes charge a fee. So it's a complex and time-consuming process and sometimes an expensive like process as well. So we eventually like figured it out, right, for you on how to route all the insurance payments from all the insurance companies correctly into your bank accounts, such that within days that money just rolls in without you having to like do anything for it, and eliminated all the paper checks, all the virtual credit cards. And then now these payments come in electronically, and the EOBs are available online. That lays the foundation to automate like this process. And I think at this point in your industry, you're at a point where like 95% of your payments can actually be fully automatically processed. So like the stack that's left is very, very, very tiny. So depending on how big your volume is, like we're talking tens, hundreds, thousands of hours of like hours that you can free up, and you can move over to more accurate and reliable software to do this job. Something that's been talked about in the DEO a lot as well, right? It's like adding tech to your P&L is something you can now do like here as well. And obviously you pick the tech over the team spending time on it because this is way more reliable and accurate and unlocks a lot of additional features. So that's step one in this process towards 95% automation. It's like set up the EFTs, set up the digital EOBs, also called ERAs. And we did that for you, right, Dr. Kwon? So there was no time spent on your end. We just took some of your basic information we needed to know about your practice and the bank account, and then just got this process started. All right, so step two in this process is now the EFTs and digital payments are set up, and the money goes straight into the bank account, and the EOBs are automatically getting posted to all the payment ledgers. Like that achieves like a major amount of like time that's saved in his practice because gone are the days that the stacks need to be tackled, the payments need to be punched in, and something can go wrong in that process there. So I think the interesting thing here we did is, and that's an important part of step two, is we trained the software together as if this was a biller that were to come work for you. So I remember that we and the engineers like spend time on configuring the software to do the write-offs in the way that you would like to get them done, right? Or what notes you like to be like written into certain like fields in your practice management system to make sure that it's correctly assigned to the right like provider. So like we trained the software together, I think with your team, to make sure that it exactly reflects like what it is if I were to come like work for you, which I did obviously, but that's not sustainable. I eventually will also like leave you. So instead I gave you the software that can take over from me. So that is kind of like step two. The payments are now coming in electronically and we train the software together based on how you like to kind of like get things customized and done in your practice. The software then also links like against the bank account, right? You can see like here as well. So it not only tells you like all these payments that like were posted, but also like if they came into the bank account or not. So it runs an automatic reconciliation process, which makes a day sheet exercise that I know many of you do kind of like redundant because the moment there's any EFT missing or it's not posted yet or vice versa, it will be flagged as a task like for the team. So that's step two. So we have all the payments come in electronically. We have the software trained to take over this whole process as if it was your most trusted like team member. That's also never sick, of course, because the cool thing with you, Dr. Kwon, you should definitely talk about like a little later is like you run, I think, triple the amount of like collections with the same staff, right? And that's mainly because the software like can indefinitely scale for you there. Right. So then let's look at step three, the final step in this process towards like automation. So the last tool that we built him is a tool to like very quickly like do the denials and do the follow-ups and the patient bills. So we started to train like the software together with your team, right? Because this also like you customize together of like what are the to-dos that or the follow-ups you would normally do. So like when would you resubmit a claim? Like when would you file a secondary? And then we set up like a smart to-do list that basically gives a handful of these like action items that the team can do. And it's similar to TurboTax for the people that are familiar with accounting software. You basically pre-fill everything for the team such that the team has to spend very little time on actually like filing that task or filing that secondary. And then something that we haven't publicly announced, so you hear it here first, the EO members, is what we're launching like with a small group of like early customers, is an AI tool that actually auto files the secondaries like for you, and soon also like the claims, such that your team is actually training the software how to do appeals and denials, and it will then actually run on autopilot under the hood. So your team spends also very little time on the follow-ups as well. The way we build this, of course, is it always errs on the side of caution. So the moment the system is unsure, it will always give a review task for the team. But I think where we're at with you right now, Eric, is that despite you run an $11 million operation, the time spent on tasks is, I think, very little, right? Like compared to your volume. All right. So that are the 3 steps that got us like there. So it might be interesting to hear from you, Eric, like what were your lessons learned by going to this transition, right? So like tripling your revenue while basically automating 95% of this like process. Like what were the experiences and the benefits that you've received, or the things that you think are worth sharing with the team, maybe lessons that we've learned together that like if we do it with other offices, what they should do and not do. Maybe talk a little bit about that with the group.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Stein. So yeah, I think 4 things come to mind. The biggest one is it saves time for me, my billing coordinator, and our team. Secondly, it improves our revenue. Thirdly, it reduces risk. And lastly, it's better for patients for their experience. These 4 things combine to unlock a bunch of different growth levers for my practice that allowed us to triple our collections while also keeping our costs low.
Mm.
So starting with the first one, saving us time. What are we doing with that time? There are lots of ideas and frameworks floating around on the highest value ways for you to spend your time. But for me, as the doctor and owner, I use this time to focus on the patient experience and growth opportunities. Things like expanding from 5 ops to 12 ops, investing in higher production procedures like Invisalign, and achieving diamond status there, and taking over operations for my wife's practice and clinical duplication, coaching my providers, my doctors and hygienists. I've been able to schedule a few hours, a few times a week to go into the operatory and help my doctors and hygienists firsthand, increasing their efficiency, productivity, and confidence. Initially, my doctor's production was half of mine, but now 3 out of 4 doctors have been able to outproduce me, and the goal is for all of them to consistently. This has really cemented our culture of mentorship. In addition, automating our posting and reconciliation also freed up lots of time for our billing coordinator, Mila, getting her out of the AR minutia and allowing her to take on more of like a manager or leader role. She's been less stressed and more focused on capturing unrealized revenue and proactively improving our AR process as a whole. Specifically, she's been able to put more time into building an infrastructure for our billing department, including building and training a team to stabilize and maintain the revenue growth. She's also been able to clean up AR, including promptly filing secondaries and appealing denied claims. But now with Lassie's AI tools, she won't have to do that anymore. And also she's been able to credential our doctors, analyze and increase our fee schedules, which was way overdue. and participate in online courses such as DEO classes and webinars to stay up to date on the ever-changing world of RCM and insurance. In addition to saving Mila and me many hours that we now spend on growing the practice, automating insurance AR has also saved us a whole lot of hypothetical staff hours. As our practice has grown, I would have had to hire and train at least X more staff to handle the load. Lassie has saved us over 3,500 hours, which translates to 442 work days, which actually equals 1.5 work years so far in posting over $10 million in EOBs for our practices. Add in the avoided hiring, training, and management, plus efficiency gains on insurance follow-ups, and it has amounted to a huge cost savings for us. Finally, on the revenue side of things, our process is now more reliable and accurate. We virtually eliminated risk of human error and embezzlement. The transition also accelerated cash flow 4 times. We went from 4 weeks to get paid post-treatment to less than a week now, and we can now bill patients more quickly so they remember what the procedure was, and in turn pay more quickly, amounting to lower AR.
Wow, so cool, Dr. Kwon, to see the power of software, because this is simply not possible, right, with people. So cool to see that now. I'm obviously a technologist, to bring that to your industry as well. It does remind me a lot of my friends that helped to build the company Stripe, that we actually run on as well. It's like they run our accounts receivable, so the bills that you will receive from like Lassie are all done through that company Stripe, and we don't therefore have a whole AR department anymore. And yeah, because it's a software program, you can very quickly scale to helping like a lot of customers without being AR becoming a blocker. And so cool to see that you applied the growth mindset using all that time to actually grow out your practice, right? And that's also something I see in all the other offices I worked with. Maybe they're not all kind of like as driven and as successful as you in expanding the growth of the practice, but let's be real, like there's so much inefficiencies that like the team found that we worked with. Like not very few practices are consistently over 5 years, always refiling, always billing patients. So like outsourcing this to AI and software is kind of a no-brainer. So the team can either just like fill the gaps and finally do the other parts of the revenue cycle management really well, or like you, which is I think most of the DEO members seeing you go to these cool growth journeys of not only kind of like optimizing the existing practice, but helping more patients, starting more operatories, training more doctors. So that's really cool to see. And thanks for sharing that story and for being on the journey with us.
Sure.
Maybe before we wrap up, because as you can tell, we can talk about this for hours because it's so exciting that this is finally happening and working. Where are we going? Where are we headed? Because people ask me that often, right? It's like, hey, Stan, you are in the city where OpenAI is building like their products, or I worked at some of these companies that grew really quick, and we're so close to the fire. And it's quite fascinating because I truly think that this, what we talk about, this is already happening right now, right? Like Dr. Kwon, you're a real doctor, like actually shaving off like 150 hours of like labor of data entry a month. But it's just scratching the surface. I think that in 5 years from now, is my prediction that it will just take maybe a handful of hours for you to run these 2 locations, and not 200 hours like anymore. And that's mainly because almost all these RCM processes are going to be like fully done by software. And maybe a handful of like hours are left to like monitor that and review things, right? Because again, you as the owner and the team should be in charge, right? But the insurance AR that we talked about today, like will almost be fully like automated. Patient billing will run on autopilot, maybe with a review step in between of the final bills and see if there are any courtesy write-offs need to happen. Insurance verification, filing, of claims. Payroll will run on autopilot. I know that many of you, like in the DEO, like pay the providers and the hygienists partly of production, right? And now you spend a lot of time computing that number, but like if a software platform knows exactly all the insurance payments and patient bills processed in a given month and who to assign it to, it's very easy to then after that like run the payroll as well, providing you with working capital, like very similarly happened with Square and Toast and companies that helped other business owners to grow. I think it in 5 years from now, like with platforms like ours and other tools, will be a couple of hours like left to like run that practice. So you can finally do what most of you I know want to do, which is like spend time with patients and actually follow build a thriving business and grow it. I always joke, maybe a good note to end on there, that I attended many DEO events and I helped many of you. And I always got stoked coming back from these events, like, wow, I learned a new tool or a new framework to kind of like grow my practice. And then I went home on Monday and then I was sitting in an RCM meeting, or for you, like needed to punch in $25,000 like in payments. So like getting to these things finally, as a result of like software, is pretty exciting. So I can't wait what you all are going to create over the coming years with most of this like being automated, and see you do the same things as people on Shopify did, right? Like now a surf shop owner can actually focus on making great surfboards, and not on the running the whole e-commerce like operation anymore. So excited to see what's in store. Let me thank you, Dr. Kwon. You're a true pioneer in this field. You're one of the first that went from fully paper to the software taking over this for you. And part of the lessons learned are incorporated like in the software, and in how to onboard like other practices. So it's a joy to have you on this journey, and excited to help more of you in the DEO. If you need help with this process, scan the QR codes, fill in a few questions. Will take about like 5 minutes. And then my team will be able to tell if we are a good fit to help you as well. And then you can book like a free 45-minute consult with one of my team members to dig into your revenue cycle management and specifically discuss what the benefits would look like for you and what a transition to like automating parts of the revenue cycle management will look like. So scan the codes, sorry, fill in a few questions, and then we're happy to look into to your setup as well. With that, thank you again, Dr. Kwon. Thank you, Hilda, for being such a gracious host, and I look forward to seeing you all soon somewhere in the country, or otherwise like on the next webinar or podcast. Bye.
That was an incredible session. Thank you, Stein, for sharing your expertise, and Dr. Kwon for sharing your story, which I'm sure many of our members and just people in general can relate to. And of course, thank you to everyone for joining us today. We hope you're walking away with some valuable takeaways on how to save time, streamline your AR, and get paid faster. If you want to dive deeper or have any follow-up questions, be sure to scan this QR code to see if Lassie is a good fit. But I'm sure Stein would love to hear from you as well. So please reach out if you have any questions, and keep an eye out for our future webinars. We've got more great topics coming your way, and have a great day, everyone. We'll see you next time.